Welcome back to episode 2 of Don't Mess Up Your Car Build here at Martini Works. The first episode we talked about wheels, and I tried to kind of debunk some of the myths around wheel manufacturing, different types of wheels, and why you would buy them, because quite honestly, a lot of it is marketing, buzz, and things like that. And the same thing could be said for suspension, specifically coilovers. So what I have in front of me are 2 coilovers, but we're talking about 3. We have our eBay coilovers over here. These are specifically Maxpeeding rods, but we're gonna kind of put a lot of those brands in the same bucket because they're all getting made at the same place. We have in the middle our BC Racing BR Series coilovers that are actually over on our 2023 Nissan Z that Gels is working on right now. We can ask him what he thinks about the downpipe. And then finally, we have the Fortunato 510 series. This is their Gen 8, and they have a whole lot more stuff that comes with this. So we're gonna be comparing the 3 because quite honestly, when it comes down to coilovers, it seems like price dictates 90% of what people want to buy. And so we wanna set the record straight where some things might be too expensive for no reason and where some things are really cheap and why they are. So let's start off with the cheapest of the bunch. Maxpeeding rods or eBay. Again, we're just gonna try and keep it very general. When you look at it and you look at something that's way more expensive, quite literally, I think this is like $1,400 more expensive. They don't actually look that different. In fact, the Maxpeeding rods actually have what looks like a little bit of an adjustable camber plate, whereas this one does not. The biggest thing that you're gonna wanna keep in mind when you're looking at super affordable coilovers is I would say there really is a pricing floor. And I would argue that that pricing floor really starts to begin at like $700 to $800. If you're looking at anything cheaper than like 750 bucks, if you're just looking at price, I can usually say you're gonna be taking some pretty hard hits on quality. The second thing I'll say is when you're going into a more affordable coilover, the thing that really matters to me is quite honestly, not just like the adjustability, not just the ride height thing, but what is actually in here in terms of damper, oil, things like that. Because you have to remember that is going to impact how the suspension behaves. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of information out there from this brand or brands like it in terms of what sort of oil they use, what kind of damper they use. Essentially, they're just hoping you buy it, you put it in there, and you love it. But for a lot of people, they're gonna notice that it's a pretty harsh ride, and the feedback of the coilover isn't that great. So, with that being said, we're gonna jump into the most popular brand, I would argue, the one brand that seems to be the king of the castle right now, and really sits at that medium price point for one of its series, which is BC Racing. So you guys know how popular these are. Literally every single application you could possibly imagine, BC Racing has an option for you. So I will say, without a doubt, if you've got a weird car, you've got a weird application, you've got something that's a little bit different, BC Racing probably has it, and they also have it in stock, which is really important if you want to get your stuff right away. I would say that's one of the biggest things I love about BC Racing versus something like Fortunato, which are all custom made. It takes them a while to get, and you can stock them. We stock a few of them just to like the more popular stuff, but if you've got something funky, it's gonna take you probably 4 to 6 weeks to get the coilovers. With BC Racing, it's gonna take you like 5 days, which is actually really nice. These ones sit right about $1,100, $1,200, I would say. So BR Series, that's the entry level from BC Racing. I would say that's the largest group of series BC Racing sells. This is where the comparison isn't technically fair because the BC Racing BR Series coilovers has the adjustability on the top. It has the ride height adjustability. It's got a lot of control. You can do a lot of things with it. It's got nice locking collars. It's got good springs. You can do the Swiss spring upgrade if you would like, and that's all fine and dandy, but it's $1,100 to $1,200. The next step up for the Fortunato 510 we're gonna compare to is $1,800. One of the greatest things I like about this, outside of the fact it's available, it's in stock, fitment's always 10 out of 10, super easy to install, and the BC Racing team, they've been around it for a minute. In the United States, I think they've been around just short of 20 years, I wanna say, and they've been making coilovers forever. These are not Chinese coilovers. These coilovers are still made overseas, but they're not made in China. What does that mean for you? It means that in terms of popularity, BC Racing is pretty much always gonna be our #1 recommended pick. The one thing I will say about the BR Series specifically though, is that if you want something that's gonna feel a little bit more connected, if you want something that's gonna feel a little bit more appropriate for race application, I just don't know if BR Series is for you. I would recommend DS or ER. That's gonna feel a little bit better. But with that being said, let's compare to the final one, which is the most expensive one out of the group, the Fortunato 510. All right, so probably one of the good things I talked about the cheaper coilovers is the fact that they're cheap. I said at the cost of that, you're gonna get something that may not always fit, and you're gonna get something that probably isn't gonna feel very good. The suspension is the #1 thing that connects the car to how you feel. So if you're wondering why your car feels like shit, you're probably investing in shit suspension, so don't do that. So that was my good and bad about the cheapest option. Now, with BC Racing coilovers, I told you the best thing about them is that they're in stock, they have a ton of applications, you can get them really fast, they're well supported, they're in a lot of motorsport, but probably one of the biggest cons to it is that I would still say that in terms of feeling everything with a car, I'm not sure the BR series is really where I would want to sit. I said jump up to the DS or ER, which is going to put you at right around that $1,400 range, which is a little bit more expensive. But when you start getting really close to that price point, it does start to put you in competition with Fortunato and the 510 series. Now, they also have the 500 series. We're looking at the 510. You're looking at anywhere from like $1,800 to $2,100. So this is like top of the price point for me until you start getting into the European application coilovers. With that being said, we've got the Fortunato 510 right here. This is supposed to go into an AP1, I believe, and you're gonna see that obviously the finish is really solid. It looks really good. One of the things I like about this finish is it's really hard to scratch and it's really hard to crack. Compared to something like this, if you end up running into something, it will almost immediately chip the paint and then it pretty much starts to run. A few things about this. You start spending more money, it all starts to look the same. What's the point? This is green, that's yellow, this is red. Is that how you do it? I wish it was that easy, but it's not. There's a lot of branding that goes into this, but there's a few things that are really important for me here. Number one, and this is something that BC does as well, is they do give you a little bit of a packet of information in terms of how everything is valved. Now, it does require a 4-year degree to understand how this graph actually works, so we'll talk about that in a different video, but this is force versus absolute velocity. I'm gonna be honest though, with a lot of street application, you're not gonna really pay attention to that. As you start getting into racing application, I'm gonna sound like an idiot because that stuff is gonna mean a ton to you. When you look at the type of oil and all the stuff that's going through it to make sure that you can actually absorb the impacts, this is actually what it looks like. It's this big bag of goo. It's AMSoil, actually, which is kind of an interesting thing that maybe you knew, maybe you didn't know, but not everyone uses the same oil. I can almost promise you that this is not in this because this is a little bit more expensive. Then when you start to look at how does the shock travel through that fluid inside, it goes through this. And essentially what that does is that's how much you're actually feeling that friction point kind of compress and then rebound. And I think, and again, it's a feeling, this does an excellent job inside the Fortunato coilover. I love how it feels. Now, we can get into Swift springs with both BC Racing and Fortunato offering Swift spring upgrades. Me personally, I do feel like it's 100% worth it if you're really trying to dial in how a car feels. If your number one priority is to make your car lower, I do think your answer is the BR Series BC Racing coilover. I think when you start to get into wanting to feel better about what the coilover does, you're starting to go into the Swift spring upgrade. If you start using that coilover a ton and you want one coilover to last you pretty much for the rest of your life, you do want to start saving up your nickels and pennies because it does get more expensive. But Fortunato does do that really well. Their kind of whole thing is about the fact that you buy it once, you can rebuild it, it's modular, you can go with the team and pretty much create this however you want. In my opinion, if you guys are looking for coilovers, honestly, the easiest way to f it up is going to be buying suspension. No matter where it is, no matter how you do it. And the reason why it sucks so much is because you're gonna feel every single time that you made the wrong decision. Not saying that you can't go cheap, just go cheaper with the right stuff. But as you start to become a little bit more picky about your coilover set, you wanna get into more detail about how it's gonna feel, how it's gonna react, you wanna start to learn more about all of this, I would really start to say jump into an either ER series BC Racing coilover or ultimately the 500 or 510 series Fortunato coilover has been absolutely bang on for us as well. You guys let us know what brand you want us to talk about next, what questions you may have with this sort of stuff, and if you just bought coilovers, hopefully from Martini Works, let us know one thing you wish you knew so that we can keep making videos like this and talk to you guys about kind of the myths, the facts, what's bullshit and what's not about aftermarket car parts. Because quite honestly, this is what we've always wanted to do with Martini Works. You can buy from your homies and your friends, or you can buy from the big corporate phonies. We're not gonna tell you that something is great just because the margins are good on it. We're gonna tell you if it's good, if we have history on it, we like it, and we know it's good. That's the difference. Hope you enjoyed. I'm Alex Martini. We'll see you on the next one. How would you rate downpipe installation on Z?
Fucking sucks.